and welcome to Brewing Brilliance, a podcast where we talk to academics from across the university who are involved with the Healthy Ageing and Chronic Conditions Research Institute. We will be speaking to researchers who are leading innovative interdisciplinary approaches to promote lifelong health, delivering improved interventions to manage chronic conditions more efficiently. These sessions are essentially opportunities for us within the Healthy Ageing and Chronic Conditions Research Institute to meet colleagues from across and beyond our faculty to foster knowledge sharing, collaboration and networking. My name is Adrienne Cleverly and today we are joined by Dr. James Murray. James is a biochemist with a career-long interest in age-related diseases. This includes diabetes, cancer and neurodegenerative diseases, with his research focusing on how cells repair damage. This led to a broader interest in the biology of ageing, and now he investigates how to enhance human health span. He is also the Honorary Secretary of the British Society for Research on Ageing, which leads us nicely into today's discussion. So first of all, hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank
you for coming back.
Thanks for letting me come back.
But so I guess we should really start by asking, can you tell us what the British Society of Research on Ageing, or what would you refer to it as?
So the British Society for Research on Ageing, we shorten it to BSRA for simplicity's sake. The BSRA is both a learned society and a charity. And it was established in the early part of the 20th century, around about 1945. It came into existence as the BSRA. It was set up by a researcher called Professor Koronchevsky, who is based at the University of Oxford. So it's probably one of the world's oldest learned societies with a focus on research on ageing. And since then, we've had loads of memberships that has driven the society to a point where today we have a membership close to, I think it's a few hundred individuals. So it's a small society, but that I think reflects the now growing interest in ageing research, because up until very recently, most research in terms of human health has been disease focused. But the BSRA for its entirety has actually been focused more on understanding the mechanisms of biological aging, understanding aging in its fundamental state, with the remit to actually help develop and fund research of high quality that can lead to improvements that allow people to live healthier and longer lives.
So ultimately then they are actually supporting research in healthy ageing just by being.
Exactly.
So how does the BSRA foster collaboration? And does it do it across disciplines or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're very interdisciplinary in how we try and drive the society forward. So we have a membership that is representative of all types of groups: research scientists based in academia, in industry, consultants. We have membership from non-academic backgrounds too, all with a vested interest in trying to drive forward understanding of the basic mechanisms of ageing and how that can be translated into improving human health span, which fits nicely with what I'm interested in terms of my research.
So does that tie in nicely then purely because of the healthy ageing element?
I think so, yeah. I think that there is a lot of research being done in the world, a lot of societies and organizations that are driven by longevity. And I know at the beginning I mentioned healthier and longer lives. Essentially, if you have a healthier life, you can tend to live longer. But what the society is not focused on is longevity research or trying to drive human lifespan per se. It's more focused on developing a better health span so that we can enjoy life for a longer period of time.
So is there enough public or government support for ageing research in the UK?
Loaded question. There's never enough funding.
It is a silly question, really, yeah.
In fact, there is an awful lot of funding in the private sector for this, again, driven by this concept of longevity. And you can think of Altos Labs and companies like that, which are heavily invested in that space. But ultimately, ageing research or understanding biological ageing has been underfunded for decades, particularly in the UK, because our research strengths have been particularly focused on disease, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and so on and so forth. And I think there's been a slow realization that underpinning all these aging-related diseases is the aging process itself. And so that's why over that, let's say the last 10 or 20 years, more focus has been placed on understanding how we age, particularly through longitudinal studies of aging, looking at population level, but also biological level. Unfortunately, what happens in that space is that as aging develops as a research area in its own right, it's still competing against funding pots which are coming towards disease areas such as cancer, diabetes, and so on and so forth. So there needs to be more funding made available, and that's one of the things that the BSRA is heavily investing its time and energy into too. We want to grow our membership, so if you want to become a member, you're more than welcome to. We're not an expensive society, but what we want to do is grow our membership so that our membership can contribute to the types of research that we fund. So one very important aspect of the BSRA is to foster greater scientific, interdisciplinary scientific collaboration. And we actually have small grant funding streams that allow us to stimulate new academic or industrial collaborations that will drive forward some aging research, focused aging research. We have summer studentships, we've got small research grants, we've got travel grants, and we have prizes and awards that we give to young early career researchers as well, particularly at our annual scientific meetings, which we have every year. And this year we will hold in the Manchester Metropolitan University, and it'll be our 74th annual scientific meeting.
That's a huge milestone, isn't it? 74.
It is.
But I'm glad you touched on the early career researchers there, because one of my questions was around, is there a role for younger researchers or early career researchers within this field right now?
Absolutely. I think in terms of early career researchers, you're at that point in your career where you're looking for your niche, looking for something that you're going to develop the rest of your career into. So if you're interested in research around aging topics, it's probably much less competitive in terms of that space as opposed to, let's say, cancer research or cardiovascular disease, because fundamental mechanisms can easily be translated. So basic discoveries in aging research can lead to translation. That's another aspect that the society is heavily pushing towards and trying to bring translational research into practice, particularly through industrial collaborations. So I think that the society is actually fostering greater increases in ECR membership simply because we see that as the future of where this aging research field is going to go. If you think that for the last 25 years of my career, my focus was mostly on aging-related diseases, not necessarily on aging, we now need to have that paradigm shift in terms of our philosophy of how we want to understand human disease that's linked to age. And we're going to do that by understanding aging mechanisms.
Because aging is such a broad subject as well, isn't it?
But that's been the challenge with funding in the past, because funders want to have a return on their investment. They want to put money into projects that can have an impact. And that's extremely important in society. We want funders such as the UKRI or Cancer Research UK to fund research that's going to lead to something that's going to be important for society. And we've moved from a research field where it's mostly been basic research to try and pivot towards that more translational type of where our research in aging can then be translated in something that's impactful in society. It's a little bit more difficult because our scope is so broad, but without understanding the basic biology, you can't really do an awful lot in terms of translation. It's more like a bit of a crapshoot. You're aiming for targets, but you're not exactly sure what you're going to hit. But what I will say is that in the field of aging research, we are making quite large and impactful discoveries that are at least leading to a change in mindset of how we treat various aging-related diseases. And again, that comes back to our research institute, the Healthy Aging and Chronic Conditions Research Institute. And that the ethos of that and how it was set up was to actually bridge that gap between what can we understand in healthy aging fields and how does that impact into disease.
Because the other thing is the aging demographic is changing, isn't it? You know, people are living longer, and with that comes more complexities, I guess, because we don't have the research behind that yet.
People living longer, that trajectory is slowing. And we might actually see it flatline and maybe even regress. And that's potentially driven by our environment and society. Okay. So what we have is, as a health challenge, as a population level challenge, is to try and understand how we can allow individuals or provide ways of supporting individuals to live a longer, healthy life rather than living longer per se. And our greatest challenge, at least in the UK and typically for the NHS, is that we have a healthcare system that's extremely overburdened by individuals that have comorbidities. Multimorbidities is a major issue, particularly obviously in later life. And so health span research will address that, because if we understand the biological mechanisms, if we understand what aging means for individuals and society in general, that will help us potentially reduce those comorbidities, multimorbidities, so that individuals can manage one or two diseases and not multiple diseases, and have a better quality of life in the lifespan that they typically have. I mean, one of the shocking things is a little bit related. One of the shocking things I discovered very recently in some of the work I've been doing is that women in Wales, for example, have the shortest lifespan of anywhere else in the British Isles. And it's by a long way. I can't quite remember the numbers, but it was very, very striking, the difference. And so for me, I want to understand why that's the case. Why is it women's health is not being well looked after in Wales? Is it at healthcare provision levels, or is it because of the environment? And the environment plays an important part in how we age, much, much more than our genetics or our inheritance patterns are. So, for me, I'm very interested in trying to understand the environmental impacts on our aging processes.
You mentioned being in this field for 25 years, and you've talked a lot about the environment. So have you seen, what's been one of the biggest things that you've noticed? How has the research evolved from, even if it's not in the 25 years, even if it's just in the last 10 years?
I think it's mostly the pivot away from the focus on genes that drive longevity towards environment impacts is far greater than anything else. And this is a bizarre sidetrack, and I know this is a bit of a shotgun discussion today, but about 10 years ago, I started lecturing undergraduate students on aging. And I started one of my lectures with looking at animals that live very long lifespans or very short lifespans. And we talked about the killifish in a previous vodcast.
Yeah.
So they have a short lifespan. But at that point, I had an example of an organism that lives in Slovenian caves. It's called the European salamander. It's the olm. It's about 20 centimeters in length. It's blind, mostly, albino. It lives in an environment that has no change in temperature, no change in humidity, no natural predators, no sunlight, and a constant food source and water source. And given its size of 20 centimeters, it can live over 70 years. And so what that illustrates is that the environment, minimal interference from the environment, can allow any organism to live a much longer lifespan than would be predicted for, let's say, a terrestrial ground-dwelling salamander, which have very short lifespans.
In comparison, how short would they be?
I think most salamanders are seasonal, or every maybe 2 to 3 years. I don't quote me on that. I'm not.
But to go from a short lifespan to 70 is a huge difference.
Some of the olms are considered to have lived over 100 years.
So, and that's purely environmental.
It's because they've had minimal environmental impact. No stress. I mean, it's not a very nice environment to live in. I wouldn't want to choose that for myself.
Live in a cave.
And there have been studies in humans, psychology studies in humans, that demonstrate that that type of closed-off environment is highly detrimental to us. We're a social species. But what it means, though, is that we are constantly being bombarded by pollutants, nanoparticles, nanoplastics. We're constantly being bombarded by particulates in the air and the atmosphere, pollution. We're constantly bombarded by UV radiation from the sun. We have
Everyday tasks.
stress, everyday tasks. Driving to work is more stressful than, let's say, walking to work and things like that. And those all impact on our lifespan. And in fact, those things and our health span and those environmental cues are probably much, much more impactful than whether we have inherited a gene that predicts for longer life. And I think that that's coming back to the question of where I saw the change. I think it's when research started to recognize much more that environment has a greater impact on our health span and longevity than figuring out which genes will make us longer and how we can switch them on or off.
But on that note, though, how are age-related diseases like cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's linked to the aging process itself?
Wear and tear and the loss of the ability to repair, essentially, I guess, to distill it down. So, for example, cancerous cells pop up at all times in various organs and tissues throughout your body. The immune system is the main way of identifying those normal cells and eliminating them. Our immune system becomes less proficient as we age. In cells of your tissues, like your liver or your heart or your brain, cells become less able to repair themselves, so they lose the ability to remove damaged proteins, or they lose the ability to reduce levels of oxidative stress. So that can lead to damage within neurons, and you end up with conditions such as Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease. And even in muscle. So if as we get older, some individuals develop sarcopenia. And so those types of diseases where you have muscle wasting or any wear and tear, our ability to repair that wear and tear decreases as we get older. I think the classic example is when you cut yourself. I cut myself the other day, and it's still healing almost a week later. Whereas when I was much younger, it took a day or two and it was fine, So I think that really speaks to why everything declines as we age. And you also got to remember that some very recent literature has demonstrated that we have two major inflection points in our aging trajectory, around about 40, 45 and around about 60, where we have this quite profound change in our physiology, where we start to feel things aren't working as well, or we start to get more aches and pains. And that's heavily linked to our biology, or to our evolutionary biology. So, I mean, anecdotally, I can say that I'm not 60 yet, but I know that when I was around 40, 45, I felt that my physical capacity to do things was changing very quickly, and it sort of stabilized again. And that's what happens as we get older. So we have these points in our life where things, seem to become more profound, and then we have a stability period as well. But that links into things like mental health, and mental health has a massive impact in our aging trajectory. So there are a number of studies that have demonstrated that high stress careers or people with mental illnesses can have quite a dramatic effect on life expectancy. And so environment, that's the key to unlocking health span and lifespan.
That's you kind of touched on what I was going to ask you, because I was going to say what the impact is in terms of why do you think it is that some people age well and some others not so well, but you've kind of covered some of that.
I guess it comes down to positive mental attitude, how you perceive yourself in your world, how you interact with your world. Yes, genetics does play a part, okay, because there's obvious correlations between families which have a high proportion of people who live to the age of 100. So there are a number of studies that have gone into that in detail, the 100-100. So sequencing genomes of 100 centenarians to try and figure out what genes are important. And we can identify various genes which correlate lovely with longevity. And those are the targets for drugs that may potentially help us live longer. But the drive for longevity research, for me, I think is the wrong way to go at improving health span. But actually one of the benefits of that research has been we've identified drugs that actually will improve, at least in laboratory animals, lifespan, but they also have health span improving benefits too, because they target many aspects of what happens when tissues and our bodies get old.
There's so many things to think about that you don't necessarily think about, isn't it? When you think of healthy aging, there are so many contributing factors.
Well, I think as scientists, we want to distill everything down and rationalize everything down to the simplest format so that we can understand it better. Okay.
Yeah.
But we also accept that we can't study everything in a single cell because it doesn't translate well into a whole organism or a human. But we want to simplify as much as we can to try and understand that. So if you take a disease example, for a large part of my career, I worked on the signaling pathway that controls how insulin stimulates glucose uptake in muscle. And it's a very simplistic system, and we can use either cell-based models or animal models to understand that. But that's only one physiological pathway and one physiological response. Aging is the holistic view on things. Aging is a multi-systemic, multi-system over time. And so it's a much, much more complex thing to understand. But a lot of the research that's being done today is aimed at doing that, either at an individual level or at a tissue level or at cell level, using model organisms, using human participants who want to invest in this type of research. And this, coming back to the BSRA, is the approach that the BSRA is taking. It's we're funding, or we want to fund research through our small grant schemes that cover everything from basic research to the potential to translate something into an intervention of value that will help individuals have that healthier lifespan.
So on that note then, what projects within the BSRA are you most excited about at the moment, or what elements of it?
So I think for a very long time, the BSRA has been a society driven by academics and researchers. This past year, we've actually recruited our first CEO, Sally Bird. So Sally has been instrumental in turning the society into something that's much more professional, with a stronger view to developing and expanding the society. That's expanding membership, expanding our participation with the general public through information sessions, through public engagement seminars, by improving our profile in terms of how we interact with our funders or funding bodies within the UK for ageing research, and also with the British government. So our current chair is Professor David Vankhoff from Durham University, and he's actively engaging with members of the British parliamentary system to try and put forward how we view research should be funded in the UK to try and improve ageing research for public benefit. I think those projects are important. And because the society has been mostly academic run for many, many years, we need to improve our public profile. And we've also engaged with the public relations individual, which we've recruited as well. So by increasing our membership, we've been able to fund these extra steps to try and move the society forward and build it. Ultimately, we have a goal of increasing our membership by 50%. We want to increase the amount of our income by charitable donation and by member dues so that we can increase the amount of money that we can spend on funding research. We want to be able to spend that money in a wise way to stimulate new academic endeavours so that we can maybe springboard early career researchers towards an academic career or a career in whatever sector where they can gain that extra funding to move the research forward at a faster pace.
So that research can evolve with us as we're evolving.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
As usual, I could talk to you for so much longer.
As usual, I could talk forever as well.
You're going to have to come back again.
Maybe.
But thank you so much for talking to us about this today. I've really enjoyed it. No, it's been a pleasure. If people want to get involved, they can look up the BSRA as well. I can link it to the...
Yeah, that would be great. BSRA has its own QR code for membership and for further information. We have a very good website, which is extremely detailed. You can learn all about all our new funding schemes. You can learn about our membership directory. You can learn about all the institutions that are involved. We have over nearly 60 institutions that are a membership across 60 institutions in the UK. And there's a lot of information on there about healthy aging too, and links out to our various partners, including we've established to go on. We've actually established some new connections with other societies, including the Cystic Fibrosis Society, the Macular Society, Cancer Research UK. So we're looking to partner and to build the BSRA into not only ageing research, but ageing research that has meaning for individuals with specific types of diseases, but less high-profile diseases too.
So there's that way of getting in touch. People can get in touch with yourself as well on your staff
Absolutely,
pages.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
And you did my bit as well, so I don't need to do that bit now. You've directed people with where to go. So if you've enjoyed this podcast and want to find out more, please reach out, like James has said, to the website or to himself, or you can visit us at the Healthy Ageing and Chronic Conditions Research Institute at Swansea University. Thank you. And thank you.
Thanks.